All right. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, everyone. This is a very special episode. I had said even before we started recording, I was kind of nerding out a little bit because I myself am a big fan of human vibration, and to be able to reach out to her to have her come on the show is an absolute honor and pleasure. So, without further ado, how are you doing today? And thank you so very much for coming on.
Thank you, Dave. I am so glad to be here, and I'm doing excellent. Better than I deserve. Doing very well.
Awesome, awesome. Well, there's so many things that I want to get into. One of the things that I brought up before we started recording was I was going through your Twitter feed just to sort of see where your head has been at lately, at least on the Twitter and social media side of things. And one of the things before getting, I guess, dare I say, into the metaphysics is I noticed you were tweeting about or quote tweeting various elements, not to get overly specific, but for example, I know this may sound to those watching or listening a little bit woo, but it's, in my opinion, it's really not. Joe Biden's face, in the sense of how people are noticing things are constantly changing, and to not
Mm,
necessarily focus on, I guess you could say, Biden specifically, but the grander picture and understanding of there being this very sophisticated underlying, we could say, mechanism that exists between Hollywood and the CIA with respects to disguises, with respects to
mm.
just pure, dare I say, theater and optics, because that's what it seems to be these days. And I just wanted to get your take on that. Are you noticing more of that sort of unveiling of that theater, if you will, or is this something you've always seen and it's just you're happy that others are now finally catching up?
It's relatively new to me. I've been onto this concept, this notion of politics as theater. I'm glad you used that word because as I explore, I personally believe that's precisely what it is. And the people in the positions of power, as we perceive them to be, I believe are essentially puppets, political puppets. And I don't mean that in a metaphorical sense. I don't mean, because we hear that, political puppets, it means someone else. Everyone says, oh, maybe Obama's George Soros's puppet. And they mean that in a sense that this entity funnels money and gives power over our leaders, and they act on, like a metaphorical puppet. But I take it one step further. I truly believe that these are literal puppets. These are characters that are puppeted by, I don't know who is actually in charge, but I truly believe that all the leaders on the world stage, currently we've got Putin. There's been many different iterations of Putin. He seems, his physical appearance seems to change all the time. We've got President Joe Biden, who again looks very different day to day. He looks different. It seems sometimes that there is a different animating spirit, whether that is an actor playing the role, they just swap them out, or if we're seeing him through the screens, which we have to remember that we really only interact with these politicians through our screens. 99.9% of the public only perceives their politicians through a screen. And remember, a screen is a tool of division. To screen, it's like a fence, a screen. So remember that when you're taking in your truth through a method of concealment, aka a screen. But we interact with our screens so completely that we believe that it's true life. And what we are witnessing now with AI, with this generative, incredibly what we quote unquote advanced AI that seems to be a tsunami right now with the chat GPTs, and what we're seeing with Midjourney and DALL-E, and these 3D live action 3D overlays, which we've kind of started to perceive with the Snapchat filters. You turn your head this way, turn your head that way. Used to be real clunky, but now it's seamless. It's seamless, and we can play with that. And I have entertained the theory, and this is my working theory, that everything that we perceive to be as advanced technology, what I just described, all this new generative stuff, it's not new. It's simply
Right.
new to us as the public. I don't really believe in deep history as we've been taught and told. And I kind of think that a lot of things that we question, like how'd they do that? The answer is not masterful ancestors. The answer is advanced technology. That's always existed and only is being doled out to us, the public, in drips and drabs over time in this kind of very scripted, planned out process. I think it's not, I think there's no coincidence that we are experiencing the onslaught of generative AI technology today, because this is the only point in time when the public would have been capable of understanding that. We've been prepped and primed and prepped and primed and prepped and primed for this our whole lives. We've actually been seeing it our whole lives. We just didn't know that that's what it was. I believe a lot of Hollywood actually has incorporated these advanced technologies. Again, anytime I say advanced, I'm using it in air quotes.
Right, right.
Because it's not really advanced. It's existing. It's existing technology. It's simply new to us. Okay, back to political puppetry. So on one side, and shout out to Rambo, my co-host on Realize Radio. This is really his area of expertise. This is let's put it into two categories. And he's at Seek the Truth 101 on Twitter if you want to search out his stuff, because it is phenomenal. Rambo, yeah, so at Seek the Truth 101, but Rambo has focused on kind of the two silos of Hollywood magic. The silo number one is what we would understand as old Hollywood magic. And kind of everything goes under the Hollywood umbrella. Politics is Hollywood. Hollywood controls. What we understand is this movie making industry does not begin and end with what we see on the big screen at the movie theater or what we're streaming through this. Hollywood is everything. Hollywood is
Right.
war. Hollywood is politics. Hollywood is literally is reality as we know it. So Hollywood has two mechanisms that we're kind of aware of. They've got the old Hollywood magic, and this is like your Mrs. Doubtfire. This is your wig. This is your fake teeth. This is your silicone, face suit that you put over your head and become a totally different person. And then the applications that go on top of that to make it seem pretty seamless. This is your Mission Impossible style mask reveal. If
Can I
anything
ask you,
taught us, of course, go ahead.
sorry to cut you off right before you go on. I just wanted to ask you, in correspondence to both what you're saying now and what you had just previously said about this technology being nothing, grand in the sense of this is, something many thousands of years old, so to speak, so much as it is something that is matured technology that has been very well developed, say 4 or 5 decades ago only, as we see, by the way, from patents. It doesn't take much to look and see
Yeah.
that, okay, what we're seeing now publicly has been developed and patented in the 50s, 60s, 70s, and just now seems to be matured. Is that what you're speaking to, just to clarify?
That's a great point, and I'm glad you asked that point of clarification. In a way, I am talking about that.
Right.
We do know now. We know as a public, it's
Yeah.
understood and accepted that the technology that we see today isn't new in that sense. It's actually a few decades behind.
Right.
We're kind of comfortable with this few decades.
Right.
I am removing. That's a truth. There is truth there. The truth is that we are separated from the technology. That what we are experiencing now has been already created. I'm taking away that timeline, that understanding of near recent.
Gotcha.
I think that advanced technology, what we see in old photographs of like sometimes the original media, where we see these new movies of like 1890s New York. Have you seen any of those? Those are kind of, those get shared on Twitter. Those get shared on, you see them on even reputable National Geographic. Weirdly, will do like a look back in time, and they'll show, look at what it was like in the early 1900s, and they show these moving pictures.
Right.
I believe, and even in our history books, when you look at, I remember when I was a child and I would look at what we understood as like a photograph of even like Abraham Lincoln. I remember thinking that looks remarkably unreal. These look like cartoons. I remember thinking that as a kid.
Right.
And I think they are. I think they are cartoons. But we'd go, well, how would they make that? How would they make that cartoon in the,
Right.
how would they make that AI image in the 1900s?
Right.
I don't really believe in time. I don't really believe in, I said earlier, I don't believe in deep history. I'm flying my freak flag. I don't believe in the story of history as we know it. I don't.
Can I just say very quickly,
Sure.
there's a lot of strong substantiating evidence, not just more than just circumstantial or anecdotal, to support what you're saying there, by the way. I mean, you look, for example, very quickly on my end of things, we focus on a lot of science things, and we notice, for example, even airships pre-World War II were very prominent, and then all of a sudden just disappeared. So to the point of what you're saying, I couldn't agree more with you.
And are you familiar with Westworld? Did you ever watch
Oh, I
Westworld?
can't believe you said that, because my
Is it on the list?
my
Okay.
members, as they hear this, they're gonna laugh. I know it because I've watched all of it. Yes, quite extensively. Yeah. Yep.
Okay, so you'd be familiar with this kind of reference. So what I understand is technology being introduced into our world. So Westworld exists, the park of Westworld. It's set in what we would understand as like the Wild West, the 1800s, pre electricity, this really rudimentary American experience. Okay, on the outside of that, on the outside of Westworld, we also understand that it's way in the future. Like it's being what is on the outside of this experience
Right.
is not in the is separated it completely by everything. It's a completely different existence. So way advanced in a way that the people in the Westworld couldn't literally never ever fathom. They just couldn't even fathom the
Right.
advancedness on the outside. Okay, so let's say the rulers of Westworld, they introduce the camera. They introduce an old-timey camera into Westworld. Well,
Right.
for the people in Westworld, us, theoretically, we're in this Westworld, in this example of us, the humanity as we know it, being kind of in a Westworld type realm.
Maybe more literal than we think, by the way. Yeah.
Perhaps
Yeah.
Westworld was a documentary and not a,
Right.
a scripted
Right.
show. But that introduction of technology is advanced for the time in space that you're in, but actually highly comically rudimentary compared to what actually exists on the outside of this realm. What I'm suggesting is what is operating this realm is so far advanced in a
Right.
way that we simply can't comprehend, that this chat GPT stuff, this mid-journey 3D, such impressive realistics down to the tiniest little pores on the human skin, just extraordinary lifelike effects being rendered through our screens. I'm suggesting that is as rudimentary as like handing an old film camera into Westworld or something.
Right.
It's jokably rudimentary technology, what we think is advanced.
Right.
Just so comically, and so I have no proof of this. I have no, and when we pull out our, this is pretty cool, my cell phone in my pocket. But,
Right.
I also think that everything that we believe to be, again, advanced technology is some sort of strange just tool of deception to take away our actual power as human beings. I
Right.
think that the cellular based, in ultra connectivity that our phones operate off of, which
Right.
in the middle of the phone is essentially a silicon chip computer, a silica salt based something with a crystalline something, and that makes all the communication immediately and brings everything there right here. We have that inside of us. If I've never dug it. I'm not allowed to. I can't do this yet. But I never opened a cadaver and really seen what was in there. But I've been told that there's some sort of gland in the middle of our brains that is a crystalline receiver called
Oh,
the
that is crystalline in
pineal gland.
structure and has like an optical lens that yes, yes, yes. No, I can
Yes.
back that up. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, the pineal
Yeah.
gland. Essentially, it would be our receiver. I do believe that we are being tricked by everything in this world into giving up an innate connectivity with each other, like a dialed inness that we just lose because okay, here's just a very light example. Back in the day, and some of your younger listeners will not resonate with this, but back in the day, I could remember telephone numbers. I had so many in my head. I had so many telephone numbers. I knew all the phone numbers for all the cute boys in school, and me and my friends, we would just dial them up on the weekends, prank call the boy, but I just knew them in my
Right.
head. We all did. We all knew I knew all my friends' phone numbers. I knew every emergency phone number I needed to know.
Right.
Phone numbers just lived and existed inside my head, no problem.
Right.
Well, I can't remember a phone number to save my life now. I simply can no longer do it. I only know one. That's my mom's phone number. That's really all. Gun to my head. That's the only emergency contact phone number. Well, okay, two. I know two. But it's like we have given that just it's not even an important ability perhaps, but we've given that ability completely over to our devices. And
Right.
because of that, we simply no longer do that action. Some may argue, well, now our brain's freed up to do other things. Okay, sure. But it also shows that once we give it up, once we give that power to an outside source, we lose it. We lose, and it takes maybe perhaps a lot to gain it back. And so if at all, if we're able to at all. And so I think that we're born with some pretty cool powers.
Right.
That might sound woo-woo, pretty cool
No, no,
powers.
no.
A connectivity. Kids have, a connection to a world that adults simply cannot see. The invisible friends, nature, they're just the pure, absolute magic of childhood, I think, is because we're still pretty dialed in and connected in to a real source, a real power base that exists within us. And then I think programming everything, literally everything, the in letters, numbers, colors, reading, writing, arithmetic. I think all of these things that we have to learn to be a focused human, in this world, and a successful human, all of those things actually like
Right.
override, reprogram our base operating language that we're born with, we're packaged with. When we come out, our base OS, essentially, like any computer-based system. And I argue that humans are computers. We are computational devices. We're bioorganic. We're not,
Sort of
but
like
we actually do. We
an
do.
organic laptop, so to speak.
Yeah, and we do
Yeah.
it like all the wiring in our, our skin is our casing, our CPU, our
Right.
random access memory, our whole electrical system inside of us is wiring. Our central nervous system is just a bunch of wires hanging through our body. It's pretty crazy and kooky looking
Right.
if you actually look at it,
Right.
alone. Okay, well, so anyway, I believe we're very powerful. We're very special. I think we're being lied to. Okay, but back to the politicians. I've gone far
Oh
afield, and
no, don't worry.
this
Don't
is
worry.
what I do.
This is awesome. Don't worry, please.
I do
Nothing.
do this. I believe we're being lied to about everything, and I also believe politics is just one of many elements of a lie. But it's a big element. And I think that I don't vote. I don't participate in voting because I personally feel that it's not about one choice or the other. It's not about putting your support for or against this guy or that guy. And I'm talking about politics on the federal level. I believe in local
Right.
politics. I believe change can be happening. I believe we really should be focusing on on the here and now in our own worlds and our own lives, instead of worrying so much about these things that
Just
don't really
curious, from
matter.
a political perspective, do you think that it's perhaps a handful, or would you be open to the possibility that it is a handful of individuals that are loosely scattered across the political spectrum or landscape that are creating these issues that seem to be artificially manufactured in a sort
Yeah.
of, problem, reaction, solution type way? More
Yeah, and
than
it flows from the
the
top.
system itself, because there are people that have argued, if from an American constitutional perspective, there's genuinely nothing wrong presuming it's all followed in principle and to the exactly as it was done, and et cetera, et cetera. But then all it
Yeah.
takes is one or two bad apples to slowly give them enough time, and they can shape a system to then appear to be what I just said, but in reality behind the scenes not be.
Yeah, it's interesting. You mentioned the Constitution, and understanding that that's been presented as like this infallible thing. And if we could just really get back to the constitutional
Right, right,
fundamentals. However, of course, human vibration is going to have some sort of alternate way of looking at it. One of the things, our constitutional rights. Let's just pick apart that first one. Our right to free speech. We fight for this so deeply, but free speech includes lies. We're
yeah,
literally signing up for the right
right.
to be lied, the right to be lied to,
Well, if I
the
could
right
just
to be
very
lied to.
quickly, it was, if to add to that point, I believe it was, I could be wrong here, but I believe that there was something put down by the founding fathers, which was that, I'm paraphrasing here, but any gathering of business individuals is by definition a conspiracy against the consumer, because by
Yeah, which
definition you're essentially
then it's
saying
like,
how.
how does capitalism
Right,
survive with that? It's so contradictory. Number two being the right to bear arms. And I'm not going to go through all of them, but I just like to think about these things that are so beholden to us that we lose our minds over and fighting on one side or the other. But the right to bear arms. I understand the argument of wanting to be able to protect yourself against an unruly government, or
mm,
to protect yourself against an outside invader.
right,
However, that just right there, the right to bear. We as humans, I think, if we were living life differently, and I mean
mm,
radically differently,
right,
we wouldn't need that type of protection for
right,
ourselves
right,
or against a government. We wouldn't have an oppressive government. We wouldn't have an animosity of fellow man. I think that it's just a trick to
Do you
make
think
us think
do
that,
you think the
yeah, we do
more
need to protect ourselves against the government because that's just the way it is. It's like
right.
accepting the right to bear arms is accepting that the government is bad and the people are bad. And it's just like, we're missing a bigger point. This
Do
is
you think
not
that
the way
bigger
to
that
live.
right? Do you think that bigger point stems to something much more intuitive, spiritual, metaphysical that is lacking in our maturity compared to anything material?
Yeah. I think this whole realm, this whole everything we understand as modern life, this everything, all the institutions, all the systems,
Mm,
everything is artifice.
right,
Is a version of living. It's a version of how to do human life. It's a
right.
version, and we're convinced that it's the only way. We're
Mm,
convinced that it's the only way. I believe it's all, again, back to the Westworld park. Westworld,
right.
all of this has been developed for us. All of our systems are designed specifically, so precisely for all the overarching rationality and reason I'm not exactly
Mhm,
sure of, but I two things. I believe everything is designed to extract our energy, to
right.
extract and to keep us kind of just turned 180 in the wrong direction. Have
Sort of
us
like in
focused.
Westworld, like a very advanced loop.
Yeah.
Right,
Yeah, a very advanced loop. And we do live on loop modes. To be a
right.
successful human being is to kind of have a very structured, day-to-day routine, work, the corporate, less so now, I'd say, post COVID, because I think COVID broke. I think it was an opportunity to kind of wake a lot of people up, into questioning these loop systems that they've lived in, and to question the way that they've done life, and to maybe make some changes that feel more intuitive to them. But in general, we're just, we take the same route to work every day. We do the same thing Monday through Friday. We do the same thing on the weekends. Every Monday kind of feels the same. All the conversations you have in work are essentially the same. Everything, all the tasks are essentially the same. We kind of live uh, in our own little loops that we create. And I think that essentially just kind of lulls us. The days just pass by. They're so quickly. Time does seem to be speeding up in a way. And I think the kind of monotony and loop nature of life that gets unquestioned helps keep us kind of trapped in that without realizing. And I'm not sure. I think many philosophers have said ultimately this, but the surest way to keep a prisoner imprisoned is to trick him into believing he is not imprisoned,
Right.
to not let him in on the truth that he's actually
And I'd love
trapped.
to that point, I'd love to pick your brain on the idea or concept, and I'm certainly oversimplifying it here, but this idea of whether it's the recent, for example, situation with the Titan or the Titanic, that kind of stuff, or whether it's, past events that were I don't want to dismiss them in the sense of importance, but at the same time, if I'm also being honest and real with myself, this happens to the average person every day. So why the focus on certain individuals over others? It makes me think of the idea of, if we think of that Westworld loop, very advanced loop system, the idea that if there was something looking to be inserted into that loop, in which, but at the time of insertion, the ones doing the insertion of certain variables changing do not want the players of the loop to notice such, and so
Yeah.
a distraction is then created, in the same way that, for example, if you have fish in a fish bowl, you pour some pellets or food on one side of the fish tank, so then all the fish swim there while you then do some cleaning on the other. Does
Mhm.
that speak to you in any way, or
Yes, that's a great analogy. Excellent analogy with the fish tank. You're right. Just create the diversion, then do what you need to do. No one's the wiser. And I think a lot of these stories, the Titan is something that is so top of mind. We just recently experienced that as a global public. It was one of those stories that you couldn't hide from. It
right,
was one of those things, unless you were literally living under a rock without internet,
right,
you could not hide from that story. You were aware of many weird points of the story, whether you wanted to be or not. And some people really wanted to be, and they got into the deep, deep minutia of that story, enthralled, absolutely transfixed. It was fascinating. And I think that there are certain stories that are introduced into our narrative because they are proven to pull our energy. There's a reason that the
mm,
billionaires were part of the Titan narrative, because
right,
we are guaranteed to care about rich people over poor people. There was, I mean, a lot of people, a lot of news organizations after the Titan kind of petered out. A lot of news organizations reported like, hey guys, there was this migrant boat where like 50 people died, you know,
Mm.
same
Yeah.
time, like, or maybe even more, maybe even more. I think it was one of the, I think it was a coast of Egypt, these migrants, you know, a harrowing journey. The whole thing sank. Way more than these five billionaires, way more lives were lost in
Right.
totality. If you, uh, and I think that that just shows there are hooks. There are certain really powerful hooks that get us. And we need to start being aware of these hooks. Like the stories about the rich people, we go mad over. We just love these stories. And it's proven that if it involves these, you know, one billionaire, well, we're hooked. Five billionaires, we're definitely going to care about this. And for some weird reason, humans seem to gravitate towards particular stories. Little dead girls. Little dead girls are from
Yeah.
white families. From
Mm.
white families, your John Benet Ramsey's, your Madeline McCann's.
R-
These girls,
Yeah.
proven,
Yeah.
proven, proven
Even
to
sorry,
capture.
Gabby Petito.
Gabby
Yeah.
Petito,
Yeah.
Pretty Little White Girl, Kaylee Anthony, that Casey Kaylee Anthony story that kind of
Mm.
I don't know if you remember that. But
Yeah.
again, all these stories are actually coming back in the news again. John Benet Ramsey, back in the news now. That's a 26 plus year case.
Wow.
Madeline McCann, back in the news now. That was 2007.
Mm.
Who's Casey Anthony's back in the news. That's almost a decade old. The Gabby Petito, she keeps coming. Just when you think that everything's been known about that, we don't care about that anymore. Story's over. All characters have left, you know, the
Right.
stage. It keeps coming back. You know,
Right.
and that again to your earlier point about the loop mode, the loop mode.
Right.
Oh, it's cyclical. It sees they circle. They circle. There's no resolution. Again, all of these stories I just mentioned, unsolved,
Can I?
essentially unsolved.
Right, and to everything you said there, which I think was fantastic. What baffles me immensely is the ability for the system itself, whether via the media or otherwise, and the way you describe the latching of the hooks into the ideology or the mass subconscious or consciousness of people is a great a great description in my opinion, because it baffles me with regards to whether the billionaires or otherwise, these are all labels that are materially attached to something that is not inherently real. And so it baffles me that there are certain areas of focus that, like you said, everyone is all about, you know, movie stars or billionaires go missing, and all of a sudden it's like, oh my gosh, what's going on? But all of a sudden, you know, an average person, exact same thing happens or similar scenario, and it's like it's nothing. So
Yeah,
it's really baffled me, this underlying ability to use the hooks of people, or the vulnerabilities rather, to hook in, and
yeah,
why they focus on certain individuals more than others, or why our subconscious gives that hook more than
yeah,
others. That's what's baffled me recently, because in
yeah.
my opinion, please tell me if you disagree or not, when it comes to the core of things, I really, in my humble view, it's not a physical scenario we're looking at. It's
Right.
very, yeah, is
Yeah,
yeah.
I feel you.
What do you think in that sense? Do you think it's dare I say it tethers back to a manipulation of light, sort of not non-physical reality that then manifests as physical?
That's a great. First of all, I love how you said the why that person.
Right,
Why
right.
this is what the George Floyd saga was so
Mm,
baffling to me, because it's not that police brutality doesn't happen. It's not that sad things, tragic things don't happen. It was just like, why this guy?
right,
Why this isn't? I'm we of all the
right,
story. Why this one?
right,
We've heard of tragic stories of victims unnecessarily lifeless at the hands of an overly brutal police presence, police force,
right,
policeman, whatever. You
right,
know, we've heard this is the first. It's not the last.
right,
Why
right.
him? Why him?
Hmm.
And I do think that they at certain points during, you know, I don't get much into the cycles of the stars, but the
Right.
planetary lines. But I do think that there are certain times of the year where
Hmm.
events are interjected into narratives are interjected into the shared collective because of perhaps it's an energy harvesting, perhaps it's a ritual of some sort to an entity and a power that I am certainly not aware of and may never will be. But I can still appreciate that it seems like at certain times of the year things are happening. I'm obsessed with the case of John Benet Ramsey. That one happened on Christmas
Well,
night. There's
if I can say very quickly to yourself and to your audience as well, perhaps there was this one gentleman that developed a model, I believe, in the 1920s called Gann's law of vibration. I don't know if you've heard of it or not. He was I believe I could be wrong on this one, an astronomer or astrologer that utilized the planetary alignments to make stock market predictions. He was
wow.
doing so well, he was shut down by I believe the SEC, I think it was, and
Mm,
essentially because he was making predictions with respects to various planetary alignments in terms of
yeah.
human behavior, and he was essentially never wrong. Now, in fairness, he made some adjustments to his predictions, but overall, he was, I think, the profit he was making on a month by month basis was insane, and it speaks to this idea of being able to manipulate that for better or worse, manipulate that
Yeah.
overall archetype of things.
Yeah, and I'm loosely interested in what goes on in like the blockchain technology and the crypto market and all that stuff. And
Right,
I've
right,
seen many comparisons, not that I've personally gone in and checked, and I don't have a stake in the game, so I'm not seeing it in my own portfolio or something, but
right.
I have heard how perfectly it's tied to moon phases. How perfectly the crypto
Wow,
market is just tied to the phases of the moon. And
wow.
all the big precipice drops have been at very specific moon cycles. um, that that is interesting to me. That is interesting to me. And I do believe what you said about the manipulated. I do believe that the manipulation is happening from the outside of the realm, not from the. I think there's some. I think this kind of goes to a bigger question. What is this place? I talk a lot about scripted reality. Things seemed it's so perfect. The timing, and I love people that explore numerology because they show, oh, this happened 33 months and 33 days and 33 this and 33 years after this, and I'm not making light of it. I do. It blows my mind. I just don't do it. Numbers aren't my thing. I just don't know numbers. I mean, if I see a 33 in a headline, I'm like, oh boy.
Right,
Or like, like a 9/11, like I'm like, oh boy.
right,
Okay. But
right.
I don't personally do it, but I do believe my takeaway from other people's beautiful explorations of these, gematria, the numerology, the dates between, I think it is alluding and revealing to a higher scripted nature, a pre-design, and perhaps it's pre-designed in a way that we're able to make that happen as us on the ground, like the design, like the pattern is set, and then we continue that pattern because we've been, again, patterned and programmed in order to Rambo, again, my co-host, he always says reflect the project, as in like we as humans on this realm, we're reflecting what's been projected onto us. We're almost like a movie projector screen, like this white canvas, or this
Right.
blank canvas, rather, this blank canvas to project light onto, and then we will then project it back. And I think that everything we learn in school, everything we absorb through our family units, everything we take in through this realm, I think it's ultimately a false projection. I think it's false everything. Even the language we
Would
speak
you say those
is
advanced
false.
loops we spoke of are embedded in that?
I think they'd have to be. I think the circular nature, it's like a cosmic carousel that it's just so perfect. And even, when we think about the stars and the celestial stars, the idea that we are on a spinning ball hurtling through space at what, 33,000 miles per hour. Our ball is rotating, um and as our ball rotates, it's also projecting, goes through space so fast. It's moving so fast, and everything around it is also doing its own incredible rotation all around us. Everything is moving so fast. And yeah, I go outside and I just look up and it's like so still and so calm. It's just, how is that happen? I don't truly believe that it's happening. But if you do time lapse, you'll see that the stars do rotate in this beautiful dance around us. there's a design, there's a mechanism, there's a
Mm,
mechanism powering. I don't personally, I don't really believe in outer space as we've been told. I don't think that we're on a spinning ball hurtling through
I
a
I
vast.
I agree with you personally.
I just
Yeah.
don't believe. I just
Mm,
don't believe it. You know,
right.
I don't.
Right.
Personally, I just simply do not believe. I don't believe in outer space as we've been taught and told. I don't know what's out there. If anything, I don't know. But
Hmm.
I don't think it's
Hmm.
that. I don't
Right.
think it's. I just don't.
Right.
Pardon me.
No,
Don't think
no,
it's
it's
that.
yeah.
But it does that. All that is not to say that I'm discounting the celestial bodies that we. I think there's something really important in the stars. I
Right.
don't know what they are, but I think that there's something really important in the in the awe-inducing magnitude of a starry sky and the perceived stillness of it, but also the obvious movement of it. If you just do time, take things in on a time lapse, whatever, you really can see that there's this, beauty. And the moon, just by basic observation, you can see the moon's in a different space throughout the year, and the sun's kind of, it's all kind of again rotating, almost like this beautiful carousel around us. Almost kind of like a planetarium, but with the nice dome on the top. Like our sky actually
Mhm.
reminds me of the planetarium. And just this is an aside, but I think that we all should be aware that we are the point zero of our observable reality. The
Right.
sky is always perfectly centered above me. It's
Right.
also perfectly centered above you
Right.
at every moment.
Hmm.
At every moment, look up.
Yes.
You're in the perfect zenith point, the absolute perfect center point of the sky. You and
Right.
you alone.
Which
And
speaks
on
to
the
your
and
being the core of your own reality. Right. Right.
right, and we all kind of have a different, it's a shared. I think that there is a shared reality, but a shared reality here in a sense that I'm here and we're having this moment, we're having this conversation,
Well, if I
we're
could say
in this
very
together. Yeah,
very
go ahead.
quickly, this idea of you and I both agreeing, for example, you're wearing headphones, this idea of perhaps there being a non-visible energetic tether back to, dare I say, some type of server in which we share that experience in I think I agree with you very strongly. Even the idea of what you said about having some type of mirror reflection, and the idea of the stars moving in a certain way, but it seems as though it certainly seems as though there's a mechanism behind it. So it's
Yeah,
almost like if the same way we look at ourselves in a mirror, for example, we know that the reflection corresponds to what we do, but that is
right.
ultimately not us, even though it has to show us exactly what's being
Correct.
reflected. Right.
Correct. And mirrors actually require a conscious observer to even operate.
Right.
A mirror is a visual projection plane. It actually operates as a visual projection plane. Won't go into it too deeply, but that thing that went viral recently about someone holding an egg behind a piece of paper, and it's like, how does the mirror know what the object is behind the paper? And it was kind of half melting people's minds, half people were like, go back to school, you idiot. They had all these rationales and reasons. But I
Right.
looked at it I saw two warring sides to this visual phenomenon, everyone trying to explain how it was done. But I saw something a little bit different. And I've always been fascinated by mirrors and how they operate. And I've never really trusted them. I've never really trusted the mirror. But what is interesting about a mirror is that it truly does require a conscious observer to even operate as a mirror. It
Mm,
kind of goes back to the tree falling in the woods. If a tree, again, this is like this, you have to kind of lay down applied physics. You have to lay it
right.
down. You have to
Hmm.
lay down all the governors in your mind on how things work. You have to
Right.
lay them down for a minute. And the old idiom: if a tree falls in the forest, does it make a sound? Some people go,
Mhm.
yes, of course it makes a sound, silly. And people go, I don't know, it doesn't make a sound. I Side three, that's the third side. I like to say, if a tree falls in a forest and literally no one, like there's no conscious observer around, there's no conscious observer
Ex-
around.
mhm.
Is there a tree at all in that moment? Is there a tree to fall at all?
Right.
Can things exist outside of conscious observation? And
Right.
that sounds like a ridiculous question.
No, it
It
does. Well,
sounds like a ridiculous question.
you're describing the double slit experiment as well, by the way.
Right.
So it's like even with Schrodinger's cat, is it to in my opinion, it's
Yes.
of my view that this speaks to the idea of quantum superpositioning, where it's
Yeah.
both there but also isn't. So the potential for it to be there is there, but not unless you directly have observed it, because you by definition are, your observation defines the boundaries and parameters of what you're looking at.
Yeah.
Without you, there's nothing to observe really, or at
Right.
least yeah.
Observation. I love that you brought it back to Schrodinger's cat and the double slit experiment, because the double slit experiment proves that observation alters.
Right.
So the double slit, it's light particles are acting one way when they're not observed, and they're
Mhm.
acting another way when they are observed. Which
Right.
I always thought it was interesting. How do you record anything without it being observed? Like how do
Right.
they even get that first one? How do they even measure that first non-observed? How do
Right.
what? My brain's like broke. But that experiment, we are taught and told it does. So observation alters reality, quote unquote.
Right.
Okay, so the Schrodinger's cat more suggests that because it's like, is there a cat inside the box? The ultimate question. But so Schrodinger's cat it questions, observation enables reality. It's not about
Mhm.
altering it. It's more about enabling it and bringing a nothingness into existence. Is our pure observation does that use a quantum leap of
Right.
nothing into something through just the absolute magnificence of observation. And I'm not suggesting that humans are the only ones that can observe consciously.
Right.
I think animals absolutely can. I wonder if everything in this realm is some sort of observer.
Well, I wonder if animals are more in tune with the things that we are lacking in terms of spiritual maturity, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah. Even trees, there's all these arguments about how trees are these super communicators. Their root systems can communicate miles and miles and miles away, and trees have like a mother tree. Like a big forest will have a mother tree who kind of sends
Mm.
out a central node, much like a Wi-Fi router. There's a central node system that projects the information outward to these smaller nodes, which then satellite nodes, which then project it all outwards. But there's like
Right.
like a mother tree. And so that's observation. The tree, it may not have eyeballs and observe like we do, but there's some sort of consciousness, observation. There's some sort of measurement. There's some sort of there's some sort of
Right.
communication going on, and that requires an intelligence. And so I do think that there's a lot of things in this realm that are observers, and I think that it's interesting. It's interesting to but again, if all of the observers were removed, if let's talk about if the meteor comes down from this space that I don't believe in, but just like if it comes down tomorrow and we're all eradicated and wiped out, or the nuclear, which I don't believe in, nuclear technology, if all the warnings, if the lifelong warnings actually hit and we're nuked tomorrow by Putin's pushing his little button, and we all go away, and all the life, the whole argument is if a nuclear annihilation, like everything's wiped, all living
Right.
creatures,
Right.
plants,
Right.
animals, everything except the cockroaches perhaps, or deep underground, whatever. Everything is wiped out. Does this whole place go away? Like does like a
Right.
bloop, and I don't mean go away as in there's nothing here, all the humans are gone. I mean cease to exist, because there's no observer to
Yes.
observe.
Right.
This
No,
place at
no,
all.
no frame of reference, no pillar to compare it to.
Yeah.
Right.
It's an interesting, I mean, these are all thought experiments. These truly are thought experiments. I want, sometimes I come off as, you know, like I'm so firm in all this,
No, no, I
but
never.
if I'm proven wrong, tomorrow I'll be the first to go, well, at least we played the game,
Right.
at least we really threw our beliefs against the wall. And then and it's that's important to do, is don't just blindly believe, but question your things. But I also I don't know anything. I don't know what happens I don't know what's out there. I don't know what happens on the other side. But I do have a really strong inclination that I've really never been able to shake. I'm only now becoming able to verbalize it, because I don't really think we have a vocabulary for this type of exploration. But
Mm.
I've always had this feeling that this world isn't quite right.
Right.
That the things we're learning aren't quite right. The
Mm.
things we do and say and how we act and move through the world, it's just not quite
Sorry,
right.
when you say not quite right, in terms of, say, for example, with schooling, would you subscribe to the idea of being given half truths, or more so just blatant lies, or a mix of both?
I think that they're needle in a haystack style. I think that we're
Mm,
given all lies,
right,
just a whole pile of lies, just
right,
just,
right.
just a whole pile of lies. But within those lies are some symbols and some coded messages waiting for us to
Right,
parse
to have
through,
it plucked
all
out.
the nonsense and see
Right.
this kind of kernel of truth within. Um, and I think that I think what's being through history, through these big massive events, that swallow our consciousness. There's lots of coded messages in. I think these stories are delivery systems throughout time. The Titanic.
Mm.
I think that there. I don't believe that there's a Titanic ship at the bottom of the sea. I
You know,
don't.
it's interesting you bring that up because I saw some of that online, and then I saw some of the theories behind that, and I said, my gosh, if you look at some of the pictures and all there's, it's like, oh my God. And this goes right back to the whole thing about the theater, but sorry, yeah.
Agreed. So, back to theater. There's all this
Right.
kind of theatrics. I don't believe there's a Titanic down there, but I do
Mm,
believe that there is something important about this story of a great
right,
ship and all the characters involved in the story then and now.
right.
I think that there are messages being
W-
being
An
almost like Morse
archetypal,
code. Yeah, like
sorry, an
a
archetypal
story.
energy that is corresponding to, say, that particular geography of this, whatever we're in.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, and even even the fact that the Titanic lies just at the realm of a depth, that lies at depth, just at the what's called the abyssal zone of the
Mm,
abyss. It's literally at the edge of the abyss, and I think that's a metaphor.
right.
And I think
Right.
when we all went down there to the Titan, as we were waiting on bated breath for these 96 hours of oxygen to, we were counting down 1 hour left, and it's like, I think that we too were down staring into the abyss. We were literally at the precipice down staring into the abyss when we let our energy go into this story. And I think it's a meta, it's a meta, it's a grand metaphor. Um,
For
and
what we
even,
may be existing within? Because I was just gonna ask that.
perhaps,
Right,
perhaps,
right.
perhaps, yeah. They do tell. This goes back to the Truman Show, one of my favorite movies.
Mhm.
My favorite movie. I mean, okay, not one of my favorite movies. It is my favorite movie.
Right.
It's my favorite movie. I'll say that. A big part of the narrative of Truman and his life trapped in this realm that he didn't realize he was inside of, but there was a grander, more advanced. Again, this is kind of a Westworld of it all. On the outside of this realm, there was something more grand and something quote unquote more real than what he was trapped in on the inside without knowing. But the fear of water was a huge part of his narrative. It
Mm,
kept him from exploring. It kept him from
right,
testing the boundaries of his prison cell, essentially.
right.
And I do think, in the 70s, it was before my time, but there was Jaws. There was the
Yeah,
idea. People really weren't scared of sharks before the movie Jaws.
right, right. That's such a great, example of the idea of seeding or planting certain ideologies in people's minds, the same way that when they talk about, nuclear this, nuclear that, that same idea.
Yeah, Hollywood's been scaring us about nuclear technology for decades. For since the dawn of Hollywood silver screen, we've been having, I guess Doctor Strangelove is set to look like old time, but it's not necessarily old
Right.
time. It's kind of set back in the time. But like that the idea, all these movies about nuclear annihilation, that little thread has been in so many narratives throughout time. We have been scared to death over a big nuclear bomb. And I guess what was it in the 40s that the bomb they were doing bomb testing in Hiroshima and
I believe so. Yeah.
but so it's been a while. We're
Right.
80 years past and we've still never experienced total nuclear annihilation. And
Right.
we've been told we had like Chernobyl, but if you actually look into it, it's thriving.
Mm,
Chernobyl was just a zone. It's said to be one of the worst nuclear disasters ever. Chernobyl. It was a
right.
meltdown of a nuclear reactor, and right, kind of in Ukraine, like Ukraine,
Right.
Russia, right, very close to where the skirmish is happening now. This theater, again, fact theater.
Right.
But if you really do your research, there were people that remained in the zone. They never left, and they were fine.
Mm.
Plants, animals, wildlife never left. They were fine,
Well,
thriving even.
sorry, have you heard of Galen Windsor by chance?
I
He tried
haven't. Is he a researcher?
A gentleman, I believe I don't know for certain if he's since passed away, but he was someone that was going and making speeches about exactly what you were talking about, what you just said about he would go and eat like blocks of uranium to show that there's this over dramatic, we could say, presence that is instilled amongst the masses from
Yeah.
a select individuals, few individuals, ideological presence, that all this stuff is dangerous, et cetera, when really
Yeah.
it was more just to show that he was trying to prove a point where you slap a radioactive symbol on anything and people just run away right away. It,
Right.
yeah.
Yeah. We can, if we are just taught to fear something, regardless of the threat being
Mm,
actual,
right.
regardless of just like Corona, just like AIDS.
Mm,
I personally don't
right.
believe in viral. I don't believe in viruses. I believe that we don't really understand how this human body system works, and a lot of things can deplatform what we understand as
Right.
our immune
I agree
system.
with you on that.
And
Yeah.
and
Yep.
the fact that Fauci was the AIDS guy and the COVID guy. Oh boy. Okay, don't we'll not get started. But
Sure, sure.
I oh, I'm sorry. I lost my lost my what was I the
We were talking about the you were saying about viruses, your belief that it's not necessarily
Right.
it's
Oh, we're taught to fear. We're just taught to
right.
fear. And thank you for putting me back on track. In COVID, all you had to see just to create the visualization of fear. I mean, just seeing people in masks, whether or not we need to wear them is completely irrelevant. Whether or not the
Right.
threat on the outside was real or not,
Mm,
completely irrelevant. The
yeah, yeah.
truth is, when you start seeing everyone wearing masks, there's a little, especially in the early days, there was just an immediate reinforcement that the threat was real.
Yeah.
The, clear and present danger is what it
Well,
introduces,
if I could say
and
very
it's
quickly
theater. It's wearing a mask.
to
Masks are theatrical elements. To wear
right,
masks is to participate in the
to your
theater.
point, the idea of or the notion of ideas actually being more of the source of fear, and
Yeah.
perhaps even things like cancer and other things, that speaks to a metaphysical hook or latch than
Yeah.
actual physical. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. And I think that there's certain, this kind of goes back to something I kind of talked about at the beginning, like our energy being the most important element. And I
right.
do think that our emotional states, this goes back to our circular system. Like we are just being, like we're just like these, like our little pistons inside are just firing out all
Mm,
of these, all of these neurons and these energies. We're just like they're firing, pew, 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 when
right.
we're, under stress, under anxiety, just these deeply, deeply, sadness, the fear, not knowing what comes next, the uncertainty, all of these
Mm,
elements
yeah.
together, which is like, kind of like the COVID starter pack: fear, uncertainty, anxiety, stress. Like that's exactly what we were introduced with right at the. Then I think all of these things actually they do something within our body system. One thing they do is they kind of take away our logic, but they kind of scramble our logic where we can't think clearly when we are in a state of fear.
Right.
We don't think we are just not as logical
A
or
state of
as clear headed.
chaotic entropy, basically.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, exactly,
Right.
exactly. So it does that. It kind of keeps us from really being able to think clearly. When you're going to do
Right.
a mass deception project, you kind of want people to be a little not thinking clearly. So it was perfect for that. And also, these energies, we can feel it registered in your body. When you
Mm,
get anxiety, you can feel it. It physically, you actually feel it you feel it in your chest. It's
yeah.
a physical thing. Our emotions are things. Our emotions are physically felt and held and transmuted and experienced in the body
Right.
in a way that I don't think that we really appreciate when we're just like, I'm stressed or I'm sad or I'm depressed.
Right.
And I'm not negating these emotional states. They happen to us as humans, but it's not just a concept. It's not just a feeling.
Can I just
It's a
say very quickly
true
that
thing in the body.
the notion of going back to this idea of the very advanced Westworld loop, the notion that many minus a select few have are able to say, okay, what is occurring within myself so that I can either transcend, mature, advance, whatever word we want to use, to
Mhm.
induce a situation where next time around or over a period of time, as things don't happen, overnight, but in some cases they might, where the anxiety that you feel now, say if you feel the same thing, next Monday would be significantly less. There's none of that. There's none of how
No.
can we reduce that. It's just here's the medication or here's the whatever and on your
Yeah.
way.
Yeah. And we are this is another conversation too, but the pharmaceutical industry has its hooks
Oh,
back there. They have its hooks
I'll just say it right
in
now.
us.
If
It's
there are
crazy.
reptilians, they're in the pharmaceutical industry. It's
And you know, okay, so this is something that I do a little exploration. I am fascinated by the body system, and I am fascinated by what the purposes of the pharmaceutical industry. And I used to be very, I used to, when I saw pharmaceutical, the word, I would see the harm right in there, like
mm,
PHARM,
right.
pharmaceuticals, P pharmaceuticals. I
Mm,
actually have changed and I do think they are harmful. I don't think we need them. Uh, I don't think we need pharmaceutical drugs. I think there's lots of natural fixes, very powerful natural fixes, and things that you can do internally to actually right your body system. But what I see it
mm,
as is like pharmaceuticals, like fakeness. I think the pharmaceutical industry, again, when I talked
yeah,
about earlier, the technology is taking away our innate ability to do things. I think the human body system is a self-healing, self-correcting, self-righting ship.
right,
It's really good. It's really good at doing these things.
right.
Um, Unfortunately, modern life is designed to eradicate
To just
that
completely,
ability, to
yeah,
completely to make us sick. Modern life is
right,
designed to make us sick,
right,
and we immediately turn to, well, good parents take their kids to the doctor. We think we're doing the right thing.
right.
We have been tricked into doing the wrong things and not even
Mm,
realizing it. So we get the kids. I don't think kids should ever be given these Tylenol, these fever reducing drugs, because fevers are good. Your body needs a fever to fight off infection. When we give it anti fever thing, it's actually totally antithetical of what your body is designed to do.
right.
And yet we just give kids Tylenol and baby aspirin and things just like it's fever reducing drugs. That's just one element. We shouldn't be doing it. We don't need them, but we've been tricked into utilizing these seemingly harmless things that
Mm,
are good for us, and not realizing that it's actually taking away your body's ability to do something very, very important. So uh, every time you take a pill to do X, you're kind of and I take multivitamins, so I sound like the pot calling the kettle black. But um, I also don't take any pharmaceuticals, and I haven't in
right.
a long time, because I have explored in many ways that different ways of living have actually cleared up certain things in my life that I thought that only pharmaceuticals could do. I'm actually a
Right.
really big proponent of eating raw garlic. It doesn't make
Oh,
your breath smell
wow.
very good. It makes you stink. But I've gotten rid of an ear infection through that, which I thought
Mm,
previously in the past, I was like, the only way I can do this is through some powerful antibiotics, which
right,
used to be my truth on a lot of things. Like the only
right.
thing to do is like,
Yeah,
blast it
right.
with the antibiotics. But now I've realized that no, there's actually some powerful, powerful, powerful. A couple of cloves of raw garlic, smashed, chew it up, swallow it whole. It is so painful. It burns so good. Like you feel it going to work. It's crazy. But do that a couple times a day for a couple of days, a week, and you will cure what ails you. As far
Wow.
it supercharges your body system. If you feel a tickle in your throat coming on, slam some raw garlic. It takes some getting used
Wow.
to, but and all that to say, even like aspirin, even Tylenol, it's from the white willow tree. It's from
Mm,
nature. It's not a wonder drug. It's actually from
right,
the bark of a tree,
right.
So I think that we have been tricked into thinking that only the drugs can make us better, when in reality, there's so many solutions inside of us and just here that we're blinded to. We're taken away from.
Well,
Taken away from us.
I couldn't agree more, and this has been an absolutely incredible and fantastic conversation. And I want to thank you so much for coming on. And I think we could probably go hours and hours and
I
hours. So
think so. I think so.
without before wrapping this up, if you could please let my audience know, both this will be up for my members first and public a little bit later, where and how you could be found, because I'm sure, I mean, it goes without saying, I think a good chunk of my audience, or I know they already know of you, but please, if you can let them know, whether your show or your Patreon, et cetera, et cetera.
Yes. So if you want to dig into my brain, Twitter's there. Twitter is searchable. I recommend any topic that interests you. Just go to my Twitter and do a search on my account with that topic, and a whole smattering of things will come up. I use my Twitter as an encyclopedia sometimes. I'm like, what did I think about this? I'll go type it in.
Nice.
It's
Right.
actually pretty great indexing in that way. Also, so that's at human vibration on Twitter, one word. On Instagram, it's kind of a different exploration. I've been having a little bit more fun with stories. I think that that's been a really wonderful way to do more visual. So it's a more visual approach versus words on Twitter. My words and my thoughts and kind of a catalog of ideas on Twitter. Insta is more visual. So that's at human vibration underscore Insta. And then Real Eyes Radio. I have to say that slow because it sounds like Real Eyes Radio. So Real Eyes Radio. We have a couple of seasons out for free. You can check those on all major platforms, Real Eyes Radio. And if you dig that, me and my co-host Rambo, we do ongoing content, regular episodes weekly, plus all sorts of bonus episodes, plus a Discord community, plus meetups, all sorts of stuff. We're actually having a meetup in London coming up. We've got a ton of people in London. Rambo's from London. I'm heading there next week. So lots going on. Real Eyes Radio on Patreon, patreon.com at Real Eyes Radio. A couple of different membership levels, lots of ways to contribute and or join in. It's not a scary, it's just jump right in. It's a beautifully, it's a wonderful community. Lots of discussions on the Discord. Our Discord's on fire. It's such a great community, like 50 different topics. All this stuff's explored. It's very collaborative. Anyway, that's how to find me. And I just love this stuff. I love these conversations. I could talk to you. I would love to talk to you. What, will you come on Realize Radio as a guest?
Yeah, absolutely. I'd be on.
Okay, good.
Yes, yeah,
We could continue this, and maybe I'll make you stay with me for an hour and a half or 2 hours on there.
Sure.
So
Absolutely.
I'll schedule that with you. Okay, awesome.
Thank
When
you
I get
so
back
much.
when I get back from Europe, I'll reach out to you.
Perfect. Yeah, if you could stick around after the recording, if that's all right, just a couple
Awesome.
things I wanted to thank you so much, and to everyone watching or listening. We'll catch all of you very, very soon. So thank you again to everybody.